First of all, I would like to mention something what's called as highland phenomenon. In Czech, Vysočina is a region roughly in between Prague and Brno. It's slightly elevated, it's colder, it's more humid, something like 700 millimeters of the water. It's characteristic for the spruce forest and for the potato growing, of course, you know. And this is a little bit, well, different country with a different history. Most of it was settled quite late, since the 12th century, and some parts even since the 15th century, while the majority of the land was settled continuously since the Neolithic times for the last 7, 8, or 9,000 years. In the central part of Vysočina, north of Slavonice, there is something what I call the poetic Bermuda Triangle, because the number, the amount of unexplained poetic phenomena is obscure. It's more than the average for the whole Czech Republic, because several important, or most important poets were born there on a quite limited area. So first, maybe let's mention this, this landscape. We are close by to Telč. We can move to Jihlava as a former center of the mining. The mining claw of the 13th century is still making a base of mining claws in Mexico, in Southern America, sorry, and elsewhere. I am reminding here Jihlava or Iglau in German, because Gustav Mahler has lived there for something like 15 years. Some critics are finding the influence of the military orchestras in his music, but more probably some sort of a place inspiration, well, could have taken place. This is a Gothic fresco of Jesus Christ from the Minaret church of Jihlava, and this is a place where Gustav Mahler was born, in a small village, well, not very far away from Jihlava, in a Jewish family. He seemed to have been influenced much by the Czech poet Otakar Březina. We shall come to him later. Close by to Humpolec, there is the old Jewish cemetery, one of the many, where grandfather of Franz Kafka, together with grandmother of Gustav Mahler, are resting, and with the other people, the place has played even more important role in the Czech literature, because another important poet called Magor was often visiting the places, and Zábrana, a translator, was translating their Jesenin's verses. Just looking at the trees, you may have some sort of the idea about the poetic and maybe melancholic, well, discharge of the place. For the American students, I have to say, you know, that in active America, the melancholy is often considered to be a negative, well, character, but, well, as a melancholy is basically a quality of a philosopher, so mostly in Central European space or in the European space, it has something to do more with the thinking about the things that have passed away, so often is viewed in a more positive or highly positive way of the people who are thinking about the past and about their place in the tradition. At the same cemetery, you will find 2 gravestones of Freund family. It's another Jewish family. They later moved to America, to New York, when they were working in the, well, classical orchestra. But what's maybe more important from our point of view is that the daughter, 15 years old, the daughter of Freund family fell in love with young Gustav Mahler. She was rejected and she committed suicide. So it might be one of the tragic notes in his music that is almost always present there. When we are talking about a local landscape, we see large space that formed by peneplan or by edge plan. It means by the surface that was made flat by chemical dissolution, but very probably it was combined with the sea abrasion, because the Miocene sediments of a shallow Miocene sea are presented in the basins. So what we might see all the way around here might be really a landscape reworked by the activity of the sea. Some other geographers are finding upper creatures, well, sediments, or well, maybe traces, you know, of the landscape that was left here. What I want to say, you know, this is almost quite characteristic Central to Western European type of the landscape. It was never covered by any continental glacier, and it has been developing continuously for the last 20 millions of the years, because there we will find quite frequently sediments of the Miocene age hidden in former valleys. We might be coming back to a monastery of Nová Říše, which is closely associated with the life of Otakar Březina, one of three really important poets of the Bohemia of the late 19th century. He was a kind of a cosmic visionary. Maybe he has the same position like Emily Dickinsonová in a way. And he lived in this town of Jaroměřice. He composed all of his poetry within 6 years. And then he had the feeling he doesn't hear the voice of maybe universe, I don't know how to call it. And he decided simply to be silent. And he was working for the rest of the life. As a teacher, he was beloved by the nation. These are, I think, the notes that were exchanged between him and the other man, called Josef Florian. Well, it would be another, I think, lecture about about important personalities. But you may write there, "Sir, the night is darker now, and the wind blows stronger. Fails my heart. I know not how I can go no longer." If I read it properly. Oh yes, you can read it better on the right there. You know what's quite characteristic for Czech culture, but even for Hungarian culture or the Polish culture, is a number of excellent translations. The small nations are always looking to find their position in the family of the other cultures, of the other European cultures. So really, well, high stress is being laid on being connected to the neighbors. So this is a writing table of Otakar Březina with some pieces of art by another visionary, František Bílek. I love you. It's written on the doors of a Jewish cemetery. And this is villa of Josef Florian in Stará Říše, a small village, about 2,000 people or so, maybe less. And in this village for about 3 decades, after year 1900, a humble man was published about 300 different books. And he had close ties with Pablo Picasso, for example. He published the first monograph by Georges Rouault. He was in touch with most of the important Catholic writers of the contemporary Europe. And he was a kind of hermit himself, sometimes quite unpleasant, collecting all the necessities in the wooden boxes in case the end of the world would come. He intended to move to Ethiopia. Professor Jaroslav Met, one of the people who is now 85 years old or so, he specialized in the Czech literature, in the Czech spiritual literature, and he lived in the villa together with the people I'm talking about for a considerable amount of the time. So he belonged to the family. Another characteristic view of the Bohemian, but it could be even the Bavarian landscape close by to Nová Říše with high sky. And we are moving to Petrkov. Petrkov was a place where Bohuslav Rejnek, the other, well, important, one of the most important poets and the graphics of the second half of the 20th century, has lived in a large village house. He was married to French poet Suzanne Renaudová, and besides his translation, he wrote several collections of really excellent poetry. And if you will be in Prague, you can visit a very large exhibition of his small dry needles etchings in Wallenstein, well, garden. So he's now becoming, or he's become a classic of the art. Basically, we are just talking about the region that's located around Jihlava or between Jihlava and Slavonice on, well, quite well, a limited scale. This is a magic garden of Zuzanne Renaud in Petrkov, wife of Gustav Reinek, sorry, cemetery. And, you know, just to say something about Georg Trakl is one of the biggest poets of the Austrian tradition, of course, was becoming more widely known in Austria, maybe in the 50s or the 60s. But as these people, teachers, mostly, you know, from small villages, were receiving, well, books from all over the world. So quite early, in 1917, they found his poetry, and poetry of Georg Trakl maybe has left a bigger influence on the Czech poetry than on the Austrian one. It was widely distributed, reprinted, completed, so he has become one of, well, something like lighting houses, or I don't know how to say it, of the Czech poetry ever. The tradition still continues. You can see some postcards of Reinek and of Josef Váchal. So we are in the family of Ivan Jirous, where Juliana Jirousova, the first wife of Magor, of this family, well, I cannot go into the details, you know, of a recent poet, well, is living and painting sacred pictures as it is a family tradition. So it means, you know, that in this region still you have the places where the same pattern of the tradition, the same history goes on uninterruptedly for the last century, and it seems that it's likely to continue even then. We are in Brtnice, and Brtnice is a place where Josef Hoffmann was born, in the yellow house over there. Actually, you know, the design of the house might seem to be a Baroque one, but it's a Baroque variation of the Hoffmann's style before he moved to Vienna. For us, Vienna, for most of the people, is a kind of a melting pot, the first one of the year 1900. Without this melting pot, the history of the art will be quite different almost everywhere. You know, just well, to give you at least one example, a few of them, you know, when the musicians were somehow protesting against the ornaments, like in the music of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, they have developed the atonal music. And at the beginning of, or before the Second World War, many of these artists, including Arnold Schoenberg, had to leave for United States, and they have influenced, well, people like John Cage, Harry Partch, well, and many of the modern American composers. So even the, well, arches of Miles Davis could have been different without Schoenberg's influence on modern America. Again, characteristic landscape, we are something like 500 to 600 meters high. Usually the forest is covering something like 40% of the whole landscape, and usually the forest is being located on the places where the soils are so infertile that no land, no arable land can be created. It's basically a photo of a space of the landscape. We are usually distinguishing these three types of the landscape, well, the classical ones where the human influences and the nature are in balance, the romantic ones with the high mountains, and the cosmic landscape where the sky is high and stars are close. So in the characteristic cosmic landscape is usually considered to be a desert, but here in this region you can even have the feeling of a space, maybe not totally of a cosmic, but of a universal space which is being charged with the activities of the people all over the region. So it might be one of the influences of the holy wind, which is still staying here and there, like early in the morning during a cold winter. Telč, a place where several Czech poets were living, UNESCO heritage, a pleasant place which we do not understand at all because of the strong influences of the Italian Renaissance and some of Saxonic Renaissance which are coming. The central square of Telč, probably you know the place where you are going to visit it, still quite beautiful. Later on, from the point of the architecture, the facade, the gables turned to the square had to be replaced by the perpendicular walls, so the fires could not easily jump from one roof to the other one, but still, fortunately enough, we have few places where the original setting is being preserved. Skeletons, part of the Jewish ghetto in Czech. Czech was a favorite place of Kafka family, so Franz Kafka used to spend there because yes, he had relatives there. Some of his summer vacation. The ghetto is still being well preserved, but it's not, you know, as big or as beautiful as the last remaining, really untouched ghetto in Třebíč, which is again worth to be visited. Thaya River is divided into so-called Moravian Thaya and Austrian Thaya. Austrian Thaya is often called German Thaya, but well, I believe that it should be more or less called Austrian, because even the Moravian Thaya is not called the Czech Thaya. So Sasha-Štip is standing at the source of the Czech Thaya River, which is, you know, all the sources are small. So all the big rivers. First bridge on Thaya River and the Czech side. Foreigner ponds. This is the other thing, you know, we were walking first Thaya River just when the floods of the last year were beginning, and we have noticed some flood effects already, something like 3 kilometers below the spring, the source of the river. And going down, you of course cannot miss a number of the ponds that existed there, not only to catch the water, but to make the energy for mills. So now many of these things that we need now to diminish the flood wave are non-existent. This is an area close by to the Thaya source, and we are coming more or less to the source of Austrian Thaya. There is the official Thaya Quelle, which is about 200 meters from this place, but it seems to be, this place seems to be more important, and these are just the marches. So quite often you even cannot find the exact place where the river is coming from, because it's coming from, let's say, a hectare or so of a marshland. These are the first meanders of Austrian Thaya River. On the fields, almost everywhere around in the heights of about 600 meters, you will find these quartz pebbles, which are witnessing the activity of Miocene rivers that were overflowing the area for several millions of the years, basically maybe up to 18 millions, almost 20 of them. So these remnants of the former pebbles can be found almost everywhere at the region. About 3 kilometers below Austrian Thaya, you can again see another pond that ceased to exist, and just a characteristic village building. north of Cvetl area, there is something what does not exist anymore in Czech Republic. And these are long fields, some of them of the medieval origin, some of them obviously younger. And because in Czech Republic, most of the fields were unified into large, uniform fields. If you will walk around these fields, you will notice several things, you know. The erosion is limited almost to zero, so the soil stays at the places. Then there is a system of the plowing that helps the water to soak in. So even after heavy rains, you see that the landscape has catched much of the water, while, you know, maybe there is there's a superficial outflow, could be 10 to 15%, but at the other fields of Czech Republic, it is from 30 to 55, sometimes 60%. So these are the ways how to help the soil in the danger of the drought, of the dry periods, and at the same time, how to help the river not to create the floods of the scales we have become too used in the last years. First, bridge over Austrian Thaya, and this is the other means of anti-flood dams that now started to be created at, well, many places, but unfortunately, you know, you have to be careful with this, well, floods, because they are narrowing the floodplain of the river, so it means that you will protect your house, but you will send the way of the water, well, downstream. So you have really to think over if you want to do it. This is a characteristic Miocene or middle tertiary course of the river that flows into these flood fields of the local landscape, but then it gradually, at the uplifted zones, it downcuts into small canyons that are sometimes being changed, as you will see, into quite large ones. And if the river is cutting through the granite area, so the isolated boulders of the granite are being left in the villages, in the fields, or in the forest, and they are attracting the people, the folk tales, attracting the feeling of the menhirs, of the standing stones, of the prehistoric rites, fairies, and other beings. This is for the comparison Thaya River on the Czech side of the boundary, going approximately in the same way and through the country, which is almost, well, which is less organized, which is in a disorder, which is in the state of return to the wilderness, but it's very close to the Austrian sides. A characteristic village called Maříž, nearby Slavonice, with the details of maybe of the former colors. Maybe we can stop here, you know, what were the original colors of the village houses in the whole area? First, you have the white color, which is of course the lime. Then you have the yellow color. Yellow color are iron ochres that were heated and that were mixed with the lime. So almost everywhere you will see this very alive and very beautiful which are, well, brown colors which are now disappearing. The blue color was produced either from the cobalt glass or from something we called smolka, which is cobalt silicate, and it was used for whitening of linen, for example. So this is a very characteristic folk combination of the colors since, well, middle Baroque period. Dačice, what you see at the beginning of the Dačice is a sugar cube, because sugar cube was invented there. Before, the sugar was being sold in cones of the different size, and you were cutting with a special hammer small pieces of the sugar that you might have needed. So this is, well, maybe important but neglected result of the local landscape. These are the granite boulders with natural forms, with the natural depressions, rocks that are looking like, well, beings, like the animals, vipers, and so on. Some of them are attracting the attention of the former people, so sometimes you will find small places of pagan sacrifices, basically of the ceramics, not of the people. Under them, they are adding, of course, you know, to the color quality of the landscape, especially during the fall. Many of these stones were cut into the half and were used for the building purposes. So this is in one filter, one of the stones that has escaped the fate of being, well, destroyed by the people with wedges, put it into the holes you will see there. These are natural depressions. But in many cases, and we know it from the cultural anthropology, these places were used as, again, as the places of small sacrifices, for example, of the eggs during the Easter, or in Poland, in Estonia and elsewhere, sometimes the daggers or the swords were hidden in them. Still, you know, you are coming and you see them and you have almost a feeling of some kind of a magic residing in the space. This is the other case of the stone that was half cut and remained preserved in the forest of the Waldviertel, and we are moving to the nearby area of Burg Sand, not very far away from Raabs. So for us, this is quite important archaeological site because it was a Slavic settlement that was destroyed in the half of the 10th century by Hungarians. Actually, Hungarians became, I would say, pacified when they have accepted a Christianity before year 1000. Otherwise, Slavic tribes have settled the area more to the south. They were stopped by the Danube, but since the 9th and the 10th century, they were being slowly pushed to the north. But more probably is a mixing of the people of the Slavic origin with the people of the Germanic origin and creating a specific type, either of Vysočina or of Waldviertel people who are, in my opinion, different from the Austrians and very different from people from Tyrolia or elsewhere. This is view of the river from Burg Sand. Now the river, well, appears in deeply cutted canyon, something like 60 meters deep. And these canyons, unlike these white valleys, are quite young. They were created during the Quaternary, and the age is quite young, 800,000 years, less than 1 million of the years. It was dated by magnetostratigraphy. Well, anyways, and so it represents a new feature in the landscape. So we are basically looking at the local landscape as a combination of two landscapes, the Miocene, the Tertiary one, pretty old one, and this rocky, vertical, or very steep, quaternary landscape, but somehow they are capable of existing together and to enrich each other. Close by to Limba, there is the rock with small, how to say it, you know, depression or something, a hole maybe. This is called the Devil's Window. And practically in all tradition, in all folklores from Europe to Iran and to India, if you have a stone with a small hole, so usually it's often called the eye of the stone. So it was believed by the people that the spirits or the spirit or the ghost of the rock was going through this this depression and could move among the people. Another such tradition is being preserved in the megalithic monuments of Britain, for example, or of England. These are, well, man-made diversion from either from the springs or from the Thaya river that were used for mills. The water energy was one of the very few sources of the energy people were capable to have, and the milling was not used only for the milling of the wheat, but let's say gunpowder, enamels, ceramic materials, glass materials, ochres, and so on were milled in the mills as well. The other use of the mills would be in blacksmiths areas or anywhere when some sort of the energy was needed. Slavonice, but this is Sla on Thaya, where you can find the same pattern of this mills stream going around the city and helping not only for the milling but for the fortification of the whole area as well. Jemnice, melancholic evening over the mining church. This is quite characteristic again, you know, for the region. It's a big stone, sometimes a tree that was just being planted here, and a fog or a bad weather or so, which is adding to the, well, I would call it a melancholic quality of the landscape. Slavonice, from the cemetery of the Renaissance. By the way, if you will go there, you can find some of the tombstones that have the features of Cubism. So around 1920, so the latest of the Cubism might be even be displayed on the funerary architecture. Slavonice as well, and the square of Slavonice, I think early in the morning, another Renaissance pearl of the whole region, so one of the most beautiful small towns of Czech Republic. If you will go there, keep noticing something what's considered to be either late Gothic, like medieval, or early Renaissance, which is a very complex structure of the ceilings. And again, maybe the main phenomenon of the ceiling is that the ceiling is changing as the light moves during the day, so the shadows and the lights are every hour or every half an hour, well, different, so you have a feeling that you are living in something like a geometrical cave which is alive. Soils, maybe I shall not comment on them, you know, but basically they are so-called flat soils, so up to 2 to 4 meters of the flat sediments were sedimented in the last 1,000 years. Here you can see the repetition of the dark layers that are something like the marshes. These are light layers, which are sandy layers of the flat sediments, and you can see the aggradation of the river. So the original floodplain was a pretty complex with a number of depression and the elevation, but now you will find there one almost a uniform plain. Above it, of course, you know, characteristic village houses in the state of the half destruction. These are New Age monuments of great basilica. So in Waldviertel, the artist claimed that he wants to bring an order into the nature, so he created a chaos. It's very proud, you know, to bringing order to nature. It's I cannot imagine it. The other damage could have been done because some of the stones are so beautiful that they might have been the original prehistorical stones or the menhirs or stela or something that were taken from the place where they do belong in order to create a sort of elegant art. Fortunately enough, the cosmic aspect of the landscape has become preserved because close by there is a factory where pieces of the satellites were constructed. This is a ring wall. These are usually medieval fortifications, small of them, but sometimes it's not really sure what it is all about, you know. Simply, well, almost ideal ring structures located with the moat, located in the landscape. Some of them are believed to be older than, let's say, year 1000, and in this case they could have been the sanctuaries, let's say, of sun, of moon, but well, it's not really, it's not spatial, it's not clear. So here you can see how it is looking like, and but from the well plane you would see the ideal circle. We are coming to the nearby region of the Karlstein, and I would simply like to point you to the fort. In European landscape, until half of the 19th century, there existed only a small amount of the bridges, but the forts were omnipresent. Of course, now we have the bridges, and very few people are ever using, well, the forts. What were the advantages? Bridges were always expensive. Bridges were easily to be destroyed by floods. So, well, local people or the local municipalities in the Middle Ages and later really, well, preferred just to build the forts. Of course, the major roads had either wooden bridges. Many of the wooden bridges could have been dismantled before the winter and then again constructed in the springtime when the spring wave of the floods from the melting snow has come through. Perhaps, well, it's a really beautiful place. So it's, I don't know what can I add. It is a place where there is a confluence of the Moravian and of the Austrian Thaya. The core of the castle is from year 1050, which is very unusual for us because in Czech Republic, most of our castles were built after year 1200. So it was here located for both for the protection of the boundary, of the land boundary between Austria and Bohemia, and for the protection of the merchant routes going from the north to the south. In Raus you will find this, well, Gothic church, and you know what is here for me, what does it represent? It represents the simplicity of the church. So it represents some of the elements, let's say, of the Reformation, of Martin Luther, you know, really the return to some sort of the original simple religion. So it means that it's reflecting a kind of, well, ascetic Protestant values, or what would have later become out of them, existing as a kind of the mentality, not only well in Austria, but in Czech Republic as well. The division of male and female corner in local pubs. Sasha Štepsic can comment on it. Folk Renaissance. There is some strength and some smile, you know, in the regional art when the people were unable to express things in a really artistic form, but instead, you know, they were very sincere and they were, how to say it, you know, you have the feelings that they have enjoyed what they are doing. Renaissance tombstone with a dragon made of the red limestone. Part of the red limestone is coming from Adnet area close by to Salzburg. It's a very favorite Renaissance stone in Austria, in Hungary, or in Czech Republic. One of many castles, Schwarzenau, located in the region, with gardens, crosses, and the river again. Weidhofen. The comments in the museum about the rise and about the development of the Weidhofen area, textile industries, old abandoned railway stations. Pulkau, I think the most important Romanesque and very beautiful monument of the whole area, which is worth to be visited. The other Romanesque apse of the, I think, of the late 12th century in La and Thaya. That's death is omnipresent. Ruins of a Gothic chapel of a small castle called Gaber, not very far away from here. Another, well, it's a romantic place, I don't know how to say it, you know, but a place where you may have a touch with the history, and of course Hardek as really mysterious, sometimes even dark, castle with the Romanesque windows you can see on the main tower. So another places, you know, that are a little bit neglected and less known. You know, I have to tell you, but you probably know it, you know, that on Czech side of the frontier, we call it Česká Kanada, Bohemian Canada, because of the artificial lakes and so on. It was one of the most neglected area of the Czech Republic after the Second World War, because it was close by to Austria. It was not possible to pass the borders, so all roads ended somewhere. The area, at least 10 kilometers wide, was considered to be a military area where only the local people could live in. So simply, it was really the end of the war. But the same thing was happening on the Austrian side. So for me, well, there is a huge difference in the mentality and in the feeling of the landscape and of the people, let's say, in between Alps, where I would say the Austrian identity is more or less an identity maybe of Tyrol, or also, but not of the Waldviertel. So it has led, you know, to a general neglect of the area, which has remained, I think, in most cases untouched by the invasions of the tourists, and still something of the spirit of the old times and of the tradition is staying here. Something you can hardly find in, let's say, in central Bohemia or in northern Bohemia, or maybe in most of the touristic parts of Austria. Drozendorf, all the villages have, and the towns have Czech names, and they are often mentioned in Czech chronicles. Drozdovice is the Czech name of Drozendorf. We are getting close by to Znojmo in Moravia, or Znaim, and this is so-called a settlement of St. Hippolytus. It was quite an important place because it is a view of the St. Hippolytus to the town of Znojmo, about Thaya river, because it was a fortified settlement of, well, of late Bronze Age time, late Iron Age. Celts were living there, Slavic people, and the place existed before the city of Znojmo has become founded during the 13th century. View of the center of Znojmo. And we are still on the settlement, and here some of the churches were discovered, and they were dated before coming of so-called apostles of the Slavs, St. Cyril and the Method, maybe 30 or 50 years earlier. And very probably, you know, these missions were led by the missionaries from the Danube region, who seems to have been the sons or the successors of the former Irish missionaries. Kaya Castle, protecting another important road just in between Hardek and as we are moving more into the southern Moravia or to Weinviertel, so this is the color of the red wine of the region. Upper Thaya is basically, I would say, a medieval region, while the lower Thaya it's more or less a Baroque region, so there are different spirits and different attitudes towards the religion, towards the world, towards drinking, well, habits, you know, in Upper Thaya, beer or the spirits are prevailing or their characteristic, while the Lower Thaya is the wine country. We are observing in the recent years the invasion of beavers. So from this place you can see about 50 recently fallen trees. Hunters are met about the situation, and the beavers are now close by to Prague, something like 30 kilometers. So it will take about, in my opinion, 3 to 5 years before they will fell down the trees in parks of Prague. Václav just getting closer to southern Moravia or in Weinviertel, so one of the castles that existed again on an early Slavic settlement of the 9th century that was originally located on an island. The same settlement starts, of course. From the point of the architecture, one of the, well, really beautiful monuments built by Fischer von Erlach is Lednice. So the horse stables are being located there. The big structure is left almost untouched, while, you know, this is a neo-Gothic late 19th century building of the Lednice Castle. Neo-historical styles, basically disliked by most of the architects in Czech Republic. It's a very large and carefully made park. So this is the interior of the horse stable of the Liechtenstein family. It's a beautiful piece of the architecture, and it's because the Liechtenstein family was a military family, or part of it. So they were the generals in a number of the battles, and in a battle you have to change your horse as many times as 10 times, for example. So on the quality of the horses, often the life of the general, well, was dependent. So we no longer wonder why, you know, even these horse stables are made with such a luxury, with marble and so on. This is a view of Lednice area, partly done by Josef Hartmut, who made the parks in Medling, in Lednice-Valtice area, which is now a UNESCO monument, and later at 2 other places, well, north in Moravia. Josef Hartmut invented pencil, so it's quite, well, important thing. And besides, he built several really beautiful, well, gardens, well, on something like 200 hectares. He changed the river courses. What you see here are the axes, the point of views of from the castle. There is the copy of the Turkish on the right-hand side of the Turkish minaret, and on the left-hand side you can see the spoon of the Freemasons and Krokwitz's measurement, which was used by the Freemasons. So often this neo-Hermetic philosophy seems to be embedded in the number of these places. They often combine the space of an English park with almost tunnels made of the stones or of the yew trees, where you walk almost under the shadow. So the people who are observing themselves find, you know, how, for example, the changes of the open and the closed space of different temperatures and so on is affecting your thought. And it seems that really these gardens were proposed with a perfect knowledge of the practical psychology. In between Znaim river and around La, let's say, you know, the river is transformed into the series of technical channels. Well, nasty, just used for the irrigation of the fields, protected by the dams on both sides. Falkenstein, well, Weinviertel, of course, you know. Falkenstein is, well, close by Castle to Mikulov, which I think will appear soon. These are just the details of the things which are all the way around us, structures, well, colors, snow, ice which is, well, melting away in the springtime, a place of shadows and of the lights at the ceiling, Slavonice. And I was for the first time walking around Thaya river. I fell into the river and I was sick for about a week or so. So this my observation of the roof above me. Grass when the snow has melted. Dark. Just the light from the church windows. And again we are returning back to this Znaim region, where a major waterwork with a number of the artificial ponds and the channels was established already at the beginning of the 14th century, 1305, but very probably even the older large modification existed here before. So in the area of the Czech Republic, this is the first and the oldest large water project, well known. One of the channels used for the irrigation, getting to Pálava Mountains. These are irises, well protected plants, floodplain forests, early in the springtime, when the nettles will come again. These strange things, they are so-called lochs, or the underground passages of different shape that were mostly excavated in less sediments in some kind of the soil. Their age is unsure, their purpose is unsure. It very probably, you know, they are reflecting some sort of a folk religion. Well, some para-ritual activities. We don't know, you know. They are simply quite beautiful to be looked at. In some cases they are looking like figures, you know. There is usually a circle going around. Well, they are still pretty enigmatic, and I am not sure, you know, if we shall ever know what they are. Mikulov, Michalsberg Castle, I think the brother castle of Falkenstein, above the steppes. Again, quite important from the point of the Jewish, especially from the Jewish culture, because Rabbi Bezalel, the creator of Golem, and other miraculous rabbis have lived in there. This is Nikolsberg and so-called Holyberg. Well, it is springtime, late in the evening. One of large Renaissance mills of the late 16th century, Slup in Moravia. A number of the Jewish cemeteries are being located nearby, often in the forest. So they are really looking now very romantic, but of course, you know, they were the resting places of the dead people. This is a place where one of the channels of the 14th century originally was diverted from the main river. Villages, churches, limestones, and the local flat land formed by clay stones, so hard and soft morphology mixed together in Pálava Mountains. Another view of the wine cellar in there. Pálava in the winter, from the point when Cyril and Method were meeting on a large early Slavic fortified settlement, soft morphology of the nearby landscape, Pálava in the background. These are the Celtic or pre-Celtic prehistorical mounds of the 5th century BC on the Austrian side of Thaya. Later on in the 9th century, the Slavic graves were cut into this very, very rich mounds. rivers and algae, Thaya under Znojmo, still wild river. Roland, well, extremely important figure. Well, one of our historians used to say that he is finding Europe where the Roland statues are being located in. And usually this Roland, or sometimes wild man statues, were depicting the market freedoms. And as you know, well, the concept of the religious and of the civil freedoms has evolved through the centuries from the market, well, freedoms. So everywhere, anywhere you will see the Roland, you know that you are, in the part of the Europe that created a kind of a pluralism. Discussing erosion, again beavers training themselves on large trees, early morning sky. Pohansko, the other important chateau of a neoclassicist origin in composed landscape that is covering 160 square kilometers with the roads, alleys, small chateaus, well, big chateaus, hunting places. So the place itself is being located again on this early Slavic settlement where the pre-Christian sanctuaries were excavated. Thaya river close by to the confluence with Morava. These are the places where the beavers are sliding down to the river. Mornings in the forests. And this is a confluence of both rivers in an area called Sotok, or the confluence, which is something like the paradise for mosquitoes and wild boars and deer. This is this area. Actually, it's very beautiful, especially in the springtime. This is so-called Moravian field, one of the most important battles of the Middle Ages, especially for the Czech, was happening because King Otakar II was killed there. It has a characteristic relief of inclined plane, and where you can attack the enemy. Then the dead body of the king was taken to Vienna, which was at these times, I'm talking about the second half of the 13th century, a Czech city, and then being brought back to Znojmo and later to be buried in the Cathedral of St. Vitus in Prague. So this is a monument of the battle of the Moravian field. Some more examples of the water drainage that are helping the people to get rid of the water very quickly and to create a flood wave later downstream. Many of the agricultural and other terraces can be found in the vicinity of the local rivers, especially on the Czech side. Now they are being gradually taken by the forest. Chateaus, compost landscape, sunsets and sunrises over the space of a landscape. Monuments, neo-historical, neoclassic monuments overlooking the whole land. And then we are coming behind the river to an area called Záhorie or Záhoří in Czech, now in Slovak Republic, which is a large area formed by aeolian or wind-driven sands and the sand dunes of the late glacial time. So another very different environment. So what would be maybe the conclusion of this very, very fast overview? It is an extreme richness of nature, of cultural monuments, and of the landscapes. Thaya River contains several, I would say, aspects, or maybe cultural units. The first one, of course, is something what I have tried to explain as Vysočina, or highland phenomenon, north of Slavonice. Then you have the area of Slavonice and Waldviertel. I have not penetrated deeply enough into it, but I know it's different, and I know that it's different from the rest of the country, because already if you will go into the Hornbecken or close by to the Vienna, you will find different people and different attitudes. Then, of course, you know, we have this area of Weinviertel and of Jižní Morava and Pálava on the Moravian side, and then close by to confluence we have Podluží, which is another strange area where you can find a mixture of the folk elements, well, with local people, Hungarians, Balkan influences, rich cultural music, and so on. So it means, you know, that on a rather limited space, you can find, I would say, the immense richness of different attitudes, how to live. Country which is sometimes quite hard, quite beautiful, which is often melancholic, foggy, landscape which often is hiding itself. It doesn't display itself easily. Landscape that is loved often by introverts, by the people who are, by philosophers, by poets, by people who want to think deeper or to get more something from the one's inside than from the outside. So simply it is a landscape which is worth to be searched and worth to be lived in. Thank you for your attention.